So welcome everyone to the track orientation for our January 2021 SMARTv2 Connectathon track. And we're doing this meeting as part of one of our regular Argonaut 2020 project calls. So what I've got on the agenda here is reviewing our Connectathon plan and talking through any details. And then once we've done that, we'll stop recording and pick up with our usual agenda. So just a quick reminder for attendees here to fill out the sign-up sheet as you usually would. But with that, let's dive into the Connectathon plan and talk through what we're aiming to accomplish next month when we get together virtually. I am not going to go through a ton of logistics. The plan is to self-organize this stuff a little bit on Zulip as we get closer to the date, but you can refer to the overview presentations from HL7 in terms of how a Connectathon works, what the sort of broad goals of participating in a Connectathon would look like. And what we're going to do in this session is really focus on the specific plan for the SMARTv2 track. So before I dive into that plan, any comments or questions from folks online? All right, I'm going to apologize a little bit for my horizontal scrolling here. I've been kind of working on a setup that allows me to view all the relevant text on these pages, but the rendering isn't great right now. So I'm going to have to be scrolling back and forth a little bit to actually show what's on here. And I will try to narrate everything that's important. So even if somebody's just listening to the audio of this call and isn't looking at the screen share, you should still come away with a pretty reasonable understanding of what's going on. So basically, this track is all about testing the proposed set of updates that we're making to the Smart App Launch Implementation Guide for SMARTv2. And there's a bunch of improvements that come along with SMARTv2, but sort of the central new feature is what we call granular or fine-grained authorization, providing a way for apps to request access to resources, not just at the file type level, but something finer-grained as well. And then along the way, there's a number of areas where we've either improved API functionality, added some new capabilities, or clarified the documentation from the original SMART-IG. So that's sort of the goals of the SMARTv2 IG. I'll make a note that this Connectathon is pretty important, the one coming up in January, because this is going to be probably the last Connectathon before we try to take this through the draft ballot process. Although, of course, I'll put an asterisk on that statement and say that we're going to be informed by our experience at the Connectathon. So if things go well, that'll probably leave us on a good track for a May draft ballot. If we identify a whole slew of issues that require additional fixes, we'll see what we can do to inline those and do some additional testing, but that might push off our timeline. So we'd really love to have participation so we can identify these kinds of things before the ballot. I'm Josh Mandel. I'm the track lead, although I might also be leaning on Gino Canessa, who helped last time around, both with leading the track and also with some of the reference implementations. And our goal here is really to build on the set of participants that we've had in these regular Argonaut calls. So these are calls hosted by Argonaut, but through the Fire Infrastructure Workgroup. They're open for anyone to participate in. And we're hoping to bring those regular participants and more together for testing these implementation guides in January. The main reference for discussion, digging into details, asking questions, raising issues, the main venue for all of that is the chat.fire.org Zulip stream for SMART. So consider that SMART stream to be the home for our track. And the recording of today's intro session, of course, will end up there as well. So we'll post links. I want to dig into specifically what we call the track details here, which is to outline the roles of participants that we're hoping will test with us in January, and then the specific testing scenarios. Oh yes, I have one other thing before we do that. I think in the world of virtual Connectathons, we've been sort of working on a variety of different collaboration models. Zulip has been really helpful for text-based chat and sharing very specific details and links. I'm thinking we might try to do something like keep an open channel in a video chat. Maybe we might do like a standing Zoom session. I keep looking for an excuse to play with GatherTown, which is a site that sort of combines video chat with the ability to move a virtual avatar around in a little map. So I'm thinking maybe we'll actually spin up a GatherTown sort of room where we can chat with each other, but we'll pick a place and announce that place in Zulip. And the goal is we want to make it as easy as possible for folks to interact in as natural a way as we can, rather than sort of coming together for special meetings every once in a while and then everybody sort of breaking up. We'd love to simulate that sort of all sitting around a table together kind of feeling where there's a low barrier to asking questions or getting some advice. So that said, let me dig into the system roles. And we're basically talking about clients and servers here, whereas we refer to them in the SMART implementation guide, apps that are launching inside of EHRs. And I'm careful to put air quotes around EHRs because really this means any sort of health data system that is FHIR enabled and that supports apps. So this includes traditional clinical data systems as well as payer data systems who might be supporting these kinds of APIs. And basically, we're looking at a set of new features or additional capabilities that are introduced in SMARTv2. And the goal is, as much as possible, we'd love to see servers support this full set of features, but we'll get into the details of how these break down. And even if you don't support all of these, you can still participate. There's going to be a subset of the scenarios that work for you. But the goal is, first of all, to make sure that your server supports a discovery API, which is a way for clients to tell which of these features are actually supported. And then once a client knows what's supported, here are the specifics that we'll be focused on. One is granular scopes, and we're going to very narrowly focus for the Connectathon on one granular scope, which is observation category-based access. We'd love to see servers that can support a whole variety of granular scopes, but this is what we'll use specifically for testing purposes to fetch observations by category. And this is a subset of what we tested last time around in September, so it's relatively well-trodden ground. But we also want to test a few of these other new capabilities. One of them is token introspection. So if your server is generating access tokens with patient-level scopes, we want to make sure that an authorized client can learn what a given token is good for, including details about which patient. One of the things that we've added in SMARTv2 is as scopes get more fine-grained, they also get longer. They take up more space over the wire. And so we wanted to have a way to kick off an authorization request that didn't have to pack too much information in a URL bar or in a get URL. And so we've added post-based authorization, so a client can choose to post an authorization request into a server. So we'd love for servers to support that for testing as well. And then finally, in our major feature list is support for PKCE, proof key for code exchange, which is a way to tie together the client that kicks off a request with the client that finishes the request and make sure that those things are the same client. It prevents certain kinds of interception attacks. So we're going to test a very narrow profile on that PKCE specification as well. And the goal for clients is to come in and be willing to test some or all of these capabilities. So you'll look through the list of servers and see which ones support what, and then do some dedicated or direct testing with those servers. Let me talk through the specific scenarios that will take advantage of these individual capabilities, and then pause and open up for questions or discussion. So the first scenario is really just focused on discovery. This is making sure that a client can fetch the well-known /smart configuration JSON file that lives on a server, and then I've highlighted a few of the new bits inside of that discovery document. And I should say this is work in progress. So hopefully what I've highlighted here is what's going to land in time for January, but this will be part of what we discuss later on the Argonaut call. But the idea is some new capabilities will appear in the capabilities array of that discovery document that advertises which features you support, as well as top-level entries that tell what sort of PKCE methods you support and where your token introspection endpoint lives. And so those are basically the discovery mechanisms for all of the major features that we want to test. Granular permissions, post-based authorization, PKCE, and token introspection. So that's scenario 0, which is just making sure that our discovery endpoints are sort of up and working. Scenario 1 is really recapitulating a use case that we've had from the very beginning of SMART, which is requesting access to resource level scopes. And this is just making sure we're all on the same page here. The syntax for these resource level scopes has changed a tiny bit since SMART v1. We've defined a mapping from the v1 scopes into our new v2 syntax, but we just wanted to call out this new syntax to make sure that servers are sort of paying attention and can support things like patient/observation.rs, which grants read and search capabilities to all of the observations associated with a given contextual patient record. So that's scenario 1. It's basically testing to make sure that an app can get authorized to access those observations on a given patient. And then after authorization, the app should be able to fetch all observations about that patient correctly. And if the app tries to do something else or something broader, it should either get an error or not get any results. So if you try to fetch observations about a different patient, maybe you get an empty array or maybe you get an error. We don't actually specify that, but you shouldn't be getting observations that you're not authorized to see. That's the basic goal of scenario 1. And then things get a little bit more interesting as we layer on some of the new capabilities. And we try to do that one piece at a time so that you can opt into testing the scenarios that your server is expected to work with. So scenario 2 is just like scenario 1, but we do category level scopes. So instead of asking for read access to all observations, we ask for read access to only observations with a category of vital signs. And I need to mark this second one here as optional. We're not requiring that servers support any creates here, but I just wanted to call out the syntax so that if a server does support create, folks know what that looks like. Let me make a quick note here that this is optional so I don't forget to mark that later. And then once you grant vital signs access, you should be able to do a query for vital signs about your patient and get back good results. But if you ask for something broader, like all observations, or something in a distinct subset like laboratory observations, then again, you shouldn't see that information. You should either get an error or an empty bundle or something like that. So that's scenario 2, where we layer on granular scopes. Scenario 3 is just like scenario 1, but the kickoff call uses a post for that authorization request. So we want to test that new capability. Scenario 4 is just like scenario 1, but the client turns Pixie on and uses the Pixie S256 proof key signature method. And scenario 5 is just token introspection. So given that I have an access token, can I issue a call to that introspection URL and get back the details associated with that token? So let me pause there, having introduced the scope that we want to test, the roles of servers and clients, and sort of a simple way to try to factor this into scenarios with numbers and names. And let me see if there's comments, feedback, questions, or other discussion on the plan. Quiet group, okay. Hopefully there's no surprises in that plan. And if that is the case, then I think we can wrap up. Oh, yeah, please.
Isaac's got his hand up, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Isaac. What you see in my screen share is what I can see. Because I'm doing the video, I can't see everybody's pictures along the side, so please shout out.
Yeah, I was late. Are we, based upon the people in on this call right now, are we gonna have a dearth of clients?
We often have a dearth of clients. It's one of the struggles, to be perfectly straightforward. My hope is that based on participation in Argonaut up to this point, we'll have a reference client from the sort of team at Microsoft. I'm hoping we'll have testing participation from the team at Apple. Certainly they've been showing up to previous Connectathons and participating in testing these new features. And I'm hoping perhaps the Care Evolution team as well. So that would be 2 or 3. By all means, though, let me sort of ask everyone here if there's clients that you work with day to day that you think are in a good position to spin up and test some of these APIs. We would love to have more support from that client perspective. So I think we'll be okay in the sense that we'll have at least a couple, but more would absolutely be better. Other thoughts, comments, questions as far as the Connectathon plan? Okay, well, thanks everyone. I think we'll wrap up the Connectathon intro portion of the call. So I'll stop recording now.